outreach. Mr. Barker.
Did you want to crane your next way or this way, or have me come to the podium? Do you have a preference?
It all depends on how much we have to look at you.
You don't have to look at all. I'll just start off for a few minutes and then turn it over to Catherine Strill, who's with our team, the ogilvy project manager. I just want to go through a quick little bit of the history so we know where we're at. As you remember, the board approved going out for an RFP for outreach and communication services in the summer of 2009, and the goal there was to pull that under the direct authority of the authority rather than within the program management team. It was in October of 2009 that the board approved awarding that contract after a competitive bid process, actually after two competitive bid processes, to ogilvy PR Worldwide. That contract, even though it was approved by the board in October 2009, was not executed until February of 2010 because of this process and some hang-ups in it. The contract that was approved was for $9 million over the course of about 4.5 budget years, which is roughly equal to about $2 million a year, which I think many of us would agree is pretty modest for a project of this size and scale. So about $2 million a year. And what that is for, Ogilvy's role is essentially to have a statewide overlay to bring consistency and oversight of the multiple communications efforts and outreach efforts that are happening at the local level throughout the state in each one of our sections as we've broken down our project into 10 sections. It's to assist and direct those local efforts to ensure that they are going, not just checking the box on the EIR process and the environmental review, but to go above and beyond that. And then also, Ogilvy's role is to manage and put in place a broader outreach effort, which will speak to environmental groups, business groups, the ag community, other communities that are not directly on the project line, which might not be spoken to by the local outreach teams. So essentially the larger statewide overlay, also to include outreach to our national partners, international partners. So a fairly big job. I want to say just a few words about how this contract is administered at the authority. We work according to the state contracts manual, which is a very prescribed and rigorous process of managing any state contract. The way the contract works is assigned to a contract manager. In this case, that's myself. Invoicing has a very prescribed process by which we receive invoices from our contractors. Within 15 days of receiving that invoice, it goes through multiple levels of review. One through our contracts unit, which matches it to the letter of the contracts manual and the letter of the law to ensure that it's filled out properly and those items being expensed are properly expensed. It goes through a round of questioning and disputes back and forth with the contractor. Within that 15 days, the invoice also goes through a review by myself as the contract manager to ensure that what is outlined in the invoice matches what work was performed, and that work performed matches an annual work plan, which is part of the overall contract and is renegotiated on an annual basis. Following the Bureau of State Audit's report on our authority, we have undergone a number of changes to our invoicing process, and this is going to include a new invoicing cover sheet and a much easier way of tracking the overall expenditures of the invoice. That's something we're putting into place right now. That's in line with what we're doing with all of our major contractors. One other note before I turn this over. Just want to give a little idea of how Ogilvy is actually structured. They are led by a core team based here in Sacramento. We have a newly appointed project manager with Ogilvy who is located within the authority, embedded within our offices, treated just as another executive staff member with access to everybody at the authority. Ogilvy has offices around the world and around the nation and around California, and they are able to tap into resources there as appropriate. Additionally, they have representatives in each one of our three regions, the Central Valley, Southern California, and the Northern California Bay Area, who are subcontracted through Ogilvy, help to maintain that consistency and that assistance and direction of the local teams. Additionally, recently we've added to Ogilvy the layer of government affairs, which means they are represented in D.C. and here in Sacramento, dealing with some of the legislative issues where we had a gap previously in our organization. With that brief overview, I think I'd like to turn it over to Catherine Strail, who was joined us on the team just a couple of months ago as the project manager for ogilvy.
Thank you.
Yes, Catherine.
I'm going to save everybody's finger from pressing the button, holding it down. Good afternoon, Chairman Pringle and members of the committee, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to review some of the outreach work that Ogilvy's been undertaking for the authority since March of last year. And as Mr. Barker indicated, I've been with the authority, inside the authority now since roughly February 1, and it's been an interesting ride all the way. I'm not going to, Mr. Barker has covered much of what I was going to say, so I'll skip over that as quickly as possible and go to some of our efforts beginning this year, not last year. We've focused primarily on 4 major areas in the last 3 months. One is message development and media support, supporting media engagement, coalition building, and continued communication with our stakeholders, legislative outreach, and then execution of the RFEI and Bidders Conference. And we won't say a lot about the RFEI program per se, except for to say that Ogilvy basically handled all of the logistics for the event, from researching and securing the venue to printing, designing invitations, press releases, announcements, etc. The logistics of the day, like audiovisual, and all the components that go along with an event of that size. We worked very hard with Parsons Brinkerhoff to execute a meet prime session as well as one-on-one sessions following the larger venue. And we also worked with Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom's office, who he actually put together a script for a video for us, which was welcoming to all of the participants. I think that there's been much said about the success of this day, and we were pleased to be part of the effort. As we said before, it attracted more than 1,500 attendees, including 20 primes and several hundred small businesses, and it did consume a large part of our effort in the first couple of months of the year. On the legislative and government affairs front, Ogilvy's contract was expanded, as we said earlier, to include here my colleague, Don Wilcox, who represents us here in Sacramento, as well as Mark Kadish and Drew Mahoney in Washington, D.C. This year, we're focusing on all of the major committees in both the Senate and the House, Senate and the Assembly. And we've arranged multiple days in the Capitol for Mr. Ruoff, as well as some of the board members, to try and increase the transparency of the authority in the legislature. And this year has brought a spade of bills dealing with the high-speed rail, and Mr. Wilcox and his team were successful in consolidating all of these bills into 2 days, as opposed to having them scattered throughout the legislative session. We work with the authority to try and provide a grid and give updates on a regular basis, weekly basis, on what's happening with all legislation, prepare letters of support, whatever letters need to be prepared to reflect what the board's official position is, and to develop fact sheets on pertinent bills to give to various interest groups. We also supported Mr. Van Ark's travel to Washington, D.C. In a trip where he met with the Bay Area Congressional Delegation and Representatives Micah, as well as Congressman McCarthy, and as well as his trip to Pennsylvania when the Vice President and Biden and the Department of Transportation Secretary LaHood rolled out the administration's high-speed rail initiative, which was unveiled in February. And finally, we were at the table with the authority and with Parsons Brinkerhoff just a month ago, I think it was, as they prepared their application for the FRA for the remaining Aero funds that were turned back by Florida. And that was helping with getting congressional support, as well as informing our stakeholders throughout the state and securing letters of support. The legislative and congressional outreach efforts will continue to be a significant effort for us. It's a challenging time, both here in Sacramento, given the budget constraints, as well as the debates that are going on in Washington. On the coalition front, we've identified and engaged key stakeholders to disseminate information to their constituents. And I won't go into all of those stakeholder groups, but they're up and down the state, and we work very closely with our regional teams in the 3 areas to communicate out to these various stakeholders, business organizations, representatives from the labor and agricultural community, environmental groups, and the like. And of course, Ms. Martinez has been a very active participant and member of the team in terms of the small business program. Our third-party efforts also include preparation of fact sheets and sharing of factual information with third-party stakeholders, which have resulted in letters to the editor or opinion pieces. And that they've been in the Fresno Bee, the Washington Post, the San Diego Union Tribune, among others, as well as the Bay Area News Group. And we also have a social media, or in the social media arena, we have about 4,000 Facebook followers now and about 3,000 followers by way of Twitter, and it's an expanding way of getting information out to people in a very quick fashion, and we can assist the authority in terms of putting out information about the authority's program as well as correcting misinformation that may be appearing. And finally, we do, well, not finally, but among other things, we also are very involved in trying to arrange public outreach efforts for the authority. We've booked about 100 different speaking opportunities for the authority staff, as well as board members up and down the state. And we've prepared a statewide program that a collateral that any member of the board or any member of the staff can use for a presentation should they need such information. I might say that we have a book here if you want to take a look. We've had more than 1,000 public meetings over the course of the last year, and this is broken down by sub-region, South, Central, and Northern California. So if you'd like to take a look through all of these meetings.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. I do want to, you recently came in to oversee all the ogilvy efforts, correct?
That's correct.
So you are the key contact person. What day did you start?
I think it was January 25th.
Okay.
I'd say basically February 1.
Okay, so from February 1 forward, could you tell me your role in overseeing the billing and the approval of charges before they are submitted to the contract administrator, Mr. Barker?
At this time, my colleague, Mindy Fletcher, who's from San Diego, and she was going to be here today, but she has a new baby that she's adopted, so she's at home. But she is still overseeing that effort within the ogilvy operation, and it's something that will eventually be transferred.
Very good. Then just share with me the procedure by which bills are charges of your various members of your team, because you have subcontractors in every region, you have staff in many areas, you have additional contract support in governmental affairs issues, at least in Washington, D.C. So tell me that procedure by which your management oversees the billings that you then submit to the authority.
Well, all billings all of our staff time, for instance, individual staff time, is logged on a daily basis with a code as to what they do sort of on an hour by hour basis, and what kinds of work that they're doing, whether it's in media support or government relations or whatever.
And in that regard, do most of those employees submit that with their immediate supervisor, or are they more on a freelance basis so they put their time down as they see fit?
No, it's all, first of all, they're only allocated so many hours depending on what their work product is that they're to be working on. And then it is all overseen at this point by Mindy Fletcher, who keeps track of what all their hours are. We have another woman in the office who's also overseeing on a daily basis what the hours are. And I might add that in San Francisco we have Mr. Sebastian Decio, who is very involved in making sure that our billings are accurate. And he's the director of finance. So we take all of this very seriously, certainly in this last year.
And I know on your initial proposal from Ogilvy, there was an advisory board where there were some key advisors that Ogilvy had identified that could provide input and review. How do you utilize them today?
We don't. That product, that work was done, I don't know, some time ago. It was early on in the Ogilvy contract, and they're no longer billing to us. Those contracts are no longer in existence.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, my question to Catherine and then to Mr. Barker. What is the internal independent audit that Ogilvy has? Is Ms. Fletcher an accountant?
No, we have the end of the audit is within our San Francisco office by Mr. Sebastian, Mr. Decio, who's
and
the director
how
of
often
finance.
is that? Are those bills audited monthly?
I believe
every
it's
other month.
I think that I should weekly. Yeah, I have to turn to my colleague here. I'm relatively new. Weekly.
Okay.
And all time is recorded online for the staff members who are recording time, and then of course all contracts are submitted monthly.
And as our chairman pointed out, that's an awful lot of time in terms of you, Mr. Barker, reviewing this for substance, not just check the boxes. How much of your time does it take on a monthly basis to review all of the time that is charged to us?
That's a great question. Luckily, I don't keep track of my hours because that would take most of my day. I would say that it depends on the level of activity in a given month. Also, I would note that Ogilvy provides an extraordinary amount of detail in its invoicing, far beyond what's required by the state contracting manual. I would say on average, it takes the better part of a day of mine to thoroughly go through each one of the invoices of each month.
Okay, so you review what they send you. It's a sort of a passive kind of thing. We don't have an internal audit program, do we, or do we?
If you consider the contracts unit review of each invoice as a sort of audit, they do go through line by line to make sure that everything is submitted appropriately.
No, I don't mean that. I mean substance. I mean taking some bills and actually picking up the phone or visiting and saying, all right, you said that you did A, B, and C. Show me your calendar. Show me. In other words, trust but verify kind of audit. We don't do that.
I can't speak to other contracts. This is the only one over which I have responsibility.
This is what I'm asking about.
And this contract recently hit its 1 year mark, at which point Mr. Van Ark and I have been discussing to do an internal audit of this contract, but we have not to this point, no.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, just
Yes,
one more. I appreciate getting an overview, but I am puzzled because I thought that what we were going to do today is be responsive to Commissioner Quentin Kopp, although he's no longer with us, has for many months been talking about the past, so it wouldn't involve today forward, that the contracts that were in place from day one to about the end of the year or beginning of this year, and I certainly joined him in that, and I thought that today staff was going to be in a position to respond to the concerns and allegations that he has made both verbally and in writing, and I'm hearing none of that, and I, for one, Mr. Chairman, would want us to have a thorough response and audit of what the allegations were, because they're pretty serious, and whether we can do that through our own authority or whether we have to go to another state agency. I'm not hearing any response to that.
Well, I was just going to say we did. I think Mr. Law, who's the president of Ogilvy West, PR West, he did write a letter trying to resolve some of those issues. But
Excuse me, Catherine, with all due respect, I read the letter. It was basically saying, we take exception to what you're saying. There wasn't a line-by-line answer to the charges that Judge Kopp made, and he made them not only in his own name, but frankly, I supported it, and I thought that what we were going to get today is a response to that.
As was mentioned, Ogilvy did, and their financing department did go through line by line and offer to address each one of those issues. We have addressed each one of those issues. I'm happy to turn that discussion that we've had into a report to you on that topic.
All right, so.
You're happy to do it. That's what I thought we were getting.
All right, so why don't we move forward with being able to respond to those specific concerns that were articulated. And we can have a fuller discussion on this at our next month's meeting, as well as I'd like to just have a better understanding of the review procedures that are a part in all the billing practices. So if you could have the appropriate people available to be able to have that discussion, so we know on a going forward basis what that internal and, for that matter, what our review audit procedures are before we pay those bills.
Could
Yes,
I make just one
Ms.
more
Shank.
comment? Thank you for the indulgence. This is really for our president, Mr. Van Ark. When we only meet once a month together, and when there are requests from the board and from various committees, I would appreciate having responses rather than just having some kind of an informal, gee, we got a report from them. I'd like a report back. I'd like to know the answers to questions that they're raised. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Toledo.
To that end, I might just ask that we actually get something formal, if not before, at our next meeting, so that we have resolution on Judge Cobb's concerns, and that formally gets resolved. So if I could make that formal request and make sure that's completed for next time we get together. Also, Catherine, you and I have had a chance to get acquainted in the last few months since you joined our team, and I'm very pleased with your appointment. I would ask that in addition to making sure that audit of invoices is done properly in a fashion to make sure we're getting the value of our investment, that you have the freedom and the power to make sure, since you are embedded and you are part of our team, that you're making sure that the right people are on the assignment. And if you feel that any of those individuals or subcontractors need to be strengthened, I would ask that you report to us any time that you feel that people are not of the standing that we would require, and that you have the freedom and power to make changes as you see necessary.
Thank you. I'll work with Mr. Barker on that.
Very good. That brings us to the end of our agenda, and I'm sorry the Operations Committee Chair was held up for these 15 minutes longer than we should. There's no other business to come before the Executive Committee.